Welcome to the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Dame, holistic nutrition coach and speaker. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode, everyone. I'm so excited for today's interview. I'm being joined by a brand new, very dear friend of mine. Mollie McGlocklin is here. Thanks for joining us, Mollie.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Oh my goodness, we could talk all day. We have just been already rolling before we even hit record. So this is going to be a lot of fun.
I know this is going to be so good. We're going to have to be careful to keep this within time.
Yes,
There's so much to talk about. And Mollie is here, as the expert in all things sleep. And it's about time we've had this conversation on the podcast. So I'm so excited that you're here. Because I know many of you listening, right? We know hopefully by now the effects that sugar has on our sleep. Not just sugar, alcohol, caffeine, lots of other things that Mollie's going to blow our mind with today. And I know many people struggle with sleep, right? This is a really difficult piece. So I'm really excited to have you here. And I want to kick things off, Mollie, for those who don't know you, where did your journey begin? What kind of got you into creating sleep as a skill and becoming this sleep expert? What was your journey like?
Yes. Well, number one, I so appreciate you sharing the kind of context for people around what they might be struggling with their sleep and how sugar, caffeine, alcohol, all those things can really play a massive role. So we'll get into all of that today. But yes, the journey for me was actually one of solving my own problem as it related to my sleep. And so what my journey really looked like is kind of a 2 or 3-part series around my relationship to my sleep. So the first part really looked like 4 years as a serial entrepreneur in Manhattan, burning the candle at both ends. I had a lot of fixed labels around my sleep. So it would be, oh, I'm a short sleeper, I'm a night owl, it's in my genes, it's always going to be this way, sleep when you're dead, all these kind of fixed labels and narratives. And from that place, sort of just, that's the way it is. And then just surviving that or changing my, kind of sense of what I needed, lowering the bar of how many hours I would need, a lot of kind of those sort of behaviors, and not noticing as the years would go on and some of my behaviors would get more and more maladaptive, going to bed later and later, waking up later and later. The management of my sleep started to look like one where I'm getting sick more and more often. I'm getting anxious. I had shingles in my 20s, all these times that probably things weren't really working as well as they could. And the whole time I'm really being pretty justified and righteous about it and saying, well, I make my own hours. It's not a big deal. I'll just sleep in later. And, a lot of kind of being my own worst enemy on some of these topics, but not really getting how significant this area was until my fiance and I decided to, if anyone knows Tim Ferriss, the 4-hour work week and all those series, we decided to be kind of Tim Ferriss-esque and put all of our stuff in storage, buy a one-way ticket, and then we're going to explore the world and it's going to be great. But we didn't, yes, exactly. Yay, we thought, but it didn't account for just the brewing levels of stress. We were self-funding one of the largest studies ever conducted on poker players. So, which is another topic. But from that place, just a lot of stress and employees to be responsible for. So we take our businesses on the road. And the way that all that stress ended up manifesting along with jet lag and what have you was insomnia and not being able to sleep night after night after night. And I really thought I was losing my mind. Like, it was one of those rock bottom moments in my life where it's really had me questioning, is this the new path for me? Am I going to need to take, medications in order to sleep? What's this all going to look like? And I'd also come from a family with a background where a lot of people did go down that path and they were kind of self-medicating for a lot of things that weren't working. And so this was a really fearful trigger for me that here it is, so it begins this path. And so from that place, I really went deep on how can I restore this? And there's a lot of, roadblocks that I met along the way. And actually at one point we had to travel back to America to really just get this whole sleep thing handled, because it was just making it so that we could not continue on what we were doing. So there's all stakes were high to get this figured out. So thankfully, as I started to restore this area of my life, and learn as much as I possibly could, I became fascinated with this realm of chronobiology, really the science of time and how this affects our biology. And from that place, really, once I got to experience not only restoring that sleep, which I shared wasn't that great, actually getting fantastic sleep, quantifiably, the type of sleep that I didn't think was even possible for myself, then it really began to sound the alarms where I just could not stop talking about it, or it kind of organically grew. I'd been in all these forums and what have you. So I start just like, working with people just to share everything I was discovering. And then it grew to working with people. Then Sleep is a Skill was born. We're now at 193 weekly newsletters. We have weekly podcasts. We're in hotels now in Casa Triviani in Manhattan. We work with professional poker players in particular and helping to optimize their sleep at the table, as well as tons of different high performers in various industries. And so I'm really, really grateful for that experience, even though at the time it was challenging to see the benefits. So if anyone's listening and what maybe you aren't in a state of true, full on insomnia, or maybe you are, but wherever you might fall, that there's something to be learned because the body is really signaling that something is not working. And so that's really part of our message, is that your sleep serves as this barometer of the workability of your life. And so we can get into some of that today.
Wow. I love that. I've never heard that before. It's just like that signal, right? Like something's not working or it is, right? That's so fascinating. And thank you for sharing your story. I think, it's so empowering. I mean, I can relate very much. Like we have to somehow get to our own rock bottom and then find our way out. And then it becomes natural that you just want to share it with everybody. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm really excited. I know I'm going to learn a lot from you already. I mean, I've never identified with someone who's been a bad sleeper. I've always kind of identified as like, I'm really good at sleeping, which is great. So
amazing, yes.
But then when I don't sleep, or like something happens, right? Or I'm traveling, or, there's a reason that I can't sleep. It totally derails me because I'm like, what? I need my sleep. So, it's this balance of what's become our normal, right? And what do, how can we really support ourselves through those times? So I think, an interesting next question that's actually like, seems so rudimentary, but I think it's important to start here for everyone listening that maybe needs this reminder. Why is sleep so important for our health? Like, why do we actually even need, quality sleep? And, we were talking before, what is this link? And I would love to hear your pieces on this. And I think, I want you to share this with the audience, right? What are the links that are now being kind of understood around neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and dementia and all of these things? I mean, obviously that's one of the reasons that you're going to mention, but why is this, why do we need good sleep?
Yes. Oh, I'm so appreciate you sharing that. And I appreciate you sharing your own personal story, because for anyone listening that does identify as a good sleeper, 110%, I want to make the point that even if you are someone that falls asleep immediately or at will and has really never thought much about their sleep, or just has been grateful that it's worked, that there are still so many things that we can do to up level our sleep, no matter where we might be. So that's why we really put it in this category of a skill set. Because based in how we live in our modern society, there's so many things that we are doing that are outside of these original kind of connection with nature that would be connecting us to these biorhythms, and not like in a woo-woo sense. I mean, certainly beneficial, spiritual, and what have you, but even from a hardwired biology sense, that the more we disconnect from these rhythms of nature, the more confused the body can become. So even for those good sleepers, there are possibilities, and I plan to, kind of drop some of those in today's conversation so that, you can find yourself in this and continue to improve. So from that place, why is sleep important? Why do we care about this? Of all the things that we could spend our time really maximizing and improving upon, why this one area? And granted, I'm biased, but I do truly believe that sleep is the foundation of this kind of pyramid for our health and well-being. For a long time, exercise and nutrition had, certainly been very important pieces of the wellness puzzle. The new year starts and you hire the nutritionist or the personal trainer or join the gym or whatever. you do these steps and that seems very clear, and those are all going to be bi-directional and absolutely impact your sleep and be a part of this puzzle. But I do believe that sleep has been this neglected part of the conversation because they so greatly impact those other areas that we're looking to fulfill on for health. And so a couple things as to why that would be. One, so there are certain studies that even just 1 to 2 nights of acute sleep deprivation can cause some of those changes. I'm sure you're very well versed in all this, in our glucose levels and our ability to stabilize that, so that we might be then seeking out some of these quick hits of energy, just as and the body is designed in a very beautiful way to do that because of the belief that there's something off in our environment. So we need to get that kind of quick hit of energy. So it can be setting us up at disadvantage for what we're looking to fill on with our health and well-being from that place, as well as being neglected from growth hormone that gets that we get to benefit from through different stages of our sleep, particularly our deep sleep. And so that's just some in that health and wellness category. But the truth is we struggle to find a single area of life that isn't negatively impacted when our sleep is at kind of sub or insufficient levels. So cardiovascular health, mental health, our productivity, our interpersonal relationships. I mean, the list is endless of how much this can really make a difference. But one of the areas that has gotten a lot of press recently because of some wide scale studies looking at what seems to be certainly a strong correlation and potentially a causation element of this conversation of sleep deprivation and our neurodegenerative response. So seeing there seems to be correlations between dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, when we are sleep deprived. So what that looks like is amyloid beta plaques sort of building up in the brain that they normally get flushed out during your deep sleep. So it's known as lymphatic drainage. And this was a discovery made more recently, not lymphatic drainage with an L, but with a G, lymphatic drainage. And that's a drainage process that's happening in the brain, particularly during that first half of the night when you tend to get a higher ratio of deep sleep. And so if you're going to bed later because of Netflix or whatever it is that we might choose to do, the body tends to still try to keep us on time. So what tends to happen is lobbing off that first half of your sleep cycles, which tends to then cut into those deep sleep potentials. So from that place, then you could be setting yourself up for more risk of some of these, effects, and certainly on the long term, but even on the short term, and kind of having more in certain studies, error rates going up when you are more sleep deprived, and so those are just kind of quantifiable ways that can further impact you, on the short and long term. So those are some reasons as to why sleep is massively important. But truth be told, you could take an entire podcast just on the why. It is astounding.
Yes, we'll have to do that. We'll definitely have to do that. That's really eye-opening and so powerful. I think everybody listening, I mean, we've all had some sort of experience where we've had some days of bad sleep, whether we were traveling or there were babies involved or whatever. Then
yes.
You know what that feels like, right? Like how exhausted we are. And I'd be really curious around those studies. I'd love to look into those more, and seeing like, is it the actual sleep deprivation that's causing, those changes in the brain? Or is it the fact that when most people are sleep deprived, they're turning immediately to sugar and processed foods and coffee, right? To try to get it's probably a combo. It's probably a combination. Yes. It's never one or the other, right? But I'm sure it's like this vicious cycle that you're like, oh, I'm tired. Now I'm going to go and eat junk and, just lower my immune system even more. Right. And, beat down, my body even more. So Absolutely. It is this vicious cycle.
Yeah, and we'll see that we did a kind of focus group through Levels Health and with the Oura Ring, and overlaid just a small group of participants looking at they're wearing continuous glucose monitors from Levels, and then they're also wearing an Oura Ring, and discovering that when those glucose levels are kind of unstable throughout the course of the day and night, that we overlaid the wake up data from Oura to see when there would be drops. So most commonly being drops in their glucose throughout the course of the night, and that those seem to be correlated. Now, of course, this is just a small look at this, but really fascinating that there seems to be both that bi-directional relationship, because then unfortunately, the less sleep you're getting, the more unstable your glucose continues to then be. And if you're also if you're not kind of getting educated by someone like yourself, then you might be continuing this cycle, and it can be really problematic.
Yeah, in a big way. I think I can just imagine everybody's heads nodding, going, yeah, that's me. I've done that. Right. And I've been there. And it's really important to understand. I'm curious in your terms, like something that I think a lot of listeners would be curious about, because I see such a debate in this, or different information around this. You know, what is considered good sleep? Like, is it the amount of time that you sleep? You know, I'm sleeping 10 hours a night, or is it the depth, or is it like, how do we actually quantify or know like what's good sleep versus, you know, maybe there's some things that I need to work on?
Yeah, really good question. Well, there was a great study that came out of Harvard Medical School where they looked at people that had rates of total sleep time that was sub 6 hours, so less than 6 hours. And that seemed to put them at a higher risk for a number of things. So diabetes, heart disease, stroke, cognitive decline, but then also bonus, death from any cause, all cause mortality.
Wow.
So going back to some of those, ill effects of a poor total amount of sleep. So that's just sleep duration. But there's also a number of people that might be listening and they say, oh, please, I can easily get 8 hours, and sometimes hypersomnia where they're getting more than that. They're getting 9 hours, 10 hours, 11 hours. So some of those individuals could be struggling with insufficient sleep quality during the time of the total amount of hours that they're getting. So hours aren't always a good indicator of total or the quality of your sleep. So we want to look at other factors. So a couple metrics that people are now being able to have a little bit more awareness around, thanks to wearables. Now they're not perfect, but there are certainly some things you can glean from them. So some indications of quality sleep throughout the course of the night, looking like how many wake ups did you have throughout the course of the night? What was the duration that then, if you were waking up, how long were you awake? Also the quality of your breath throughout the course of the night. So that can look at respiratory rate. So how many breaths are you taking per minute while you're sleeping? Then that can also get into weeding out any possible disorders, and most commonly sleep apnea, which is hugely on the rise, which another bidirectional one, which there's arguments around that our types of foods and our environment could be changing our own anatomy. And that could be playing a role in some of our results with these really massive uptick. And it's no longer, or we want to make sure that it's not just this misnomer of it looks like a particular person. We used to, have an image of who would have sleep apnea, and now we're seeing people that, look outwardly very healthy and what have you, and having really either mild, moderate, to severe sleep apnea. So certainly the breath can be a factor, but then also what's your heart rate looking like throughout the course of the night? And the arc of the heart rate, we're looking for kind of more of a nice hammock-like shape throughout the course of the night, so that you're dipping nicely and then beginning to rev up for, to take you into the morning. But sometimes people have lots of different shapes than that, and a resting heart rate that might be higher than advised. And so from that place, you're also looking at things like heart rate variability. And so that can be a nice metric of recovery. So how recovered were you throughout the course of the night? Also your body temperature throughout the night. So there's a number of other metrics that you can look at more objectively, but you can also look at subjective too. When you wake up, are you feeling refreshed or not? Are you feeling tired throughout the course of the day? Is this something where you're finding yourself really falling asleep often, or having to take many naps? Really auditing your sleep and getting clear on, is it working for you or not working for you?
Yeah, which can often be the hardest part, right? Having to get honest with yourself and everyone listening. I know it's hard, right? Like, ooh, okay, there are some things that need to change, and that's okay, right? Like this is, and I love that you approach us as as a skill. I feel like, yes, if back in the day before electricity, when we were all living off the land, like this was something that just came naturally, right? And unless you were being woken up by bears or whatever,
yes,
but or danger. But yeah, in this day and age, like we do have to arm ourselves with some tools and ultimately commit to this being a priority. Like I know for me, Sleep has, I never actually made the conscious choice. I don't think. I've just always known that it's a priority. Like sleep is one of my highest like values, like good sleep.
Yes.
I've
Preach.
always been the one that was just like, going to bed at 9 o'clock at the party, right? I was like, I'm out of here. Bye everyone. And I've never, probably never resonated as a night owl. So like staying up late is just not my thing. And I feel like junk the next day. So why would I do that? Right. Same with, overeating on sugar and alcohol and all, like, it just doesn't feel good. So I've always been, actually, we were just at a family party a couple of weeks ago, and I now know with family, this is kind of funny, but we actually like just disappear. Like we were staying there and we don't even say goodnight to people. That might sound rude, but it's actually like a really empowering boundary, because
I
we
love
know
that.
we get a lot of like guilt and shame for going to bed early. And
Yeah.
I don't want to deal with that. So we
Yeah.
just sneak away and then pop up in the morning. And it just like, I feel so empowered when I do that, because I know that I'm looking after like what I need and able to show up the next day feeling rested and not, hungover and a mess like the rest of the people. So that's one of my little tricks and secrets.
No, I love that you're speaking to this, because this is a big part of the management of this, because a lot of it's how you can put the steps and the things to do, but it's the in practicality, and we are social creatures that often we can fall to the default of the group and what's happening, the group dynamics. And so for you to be able to be a leader and stand up for yourself and your well-being and be aware of the why, that this is important, and what you can expect if you don't do that, and what you can expect if you do that. All of those things are huge, because that's what will really take this to actually be implemented as a real lifestyle versus just like a nice idea. So that's
and I'm glad I mentioned that too. Like this is kind of one of those beautiful tangents, but really important, because that is like socially, there's so much pressure around like staying up late. And like, if you're out with friends, right, we're going dancing, or like, you've got to stay up till 3 a.m. My husband used to stay up till 4. I was like, what are you kidding? I'm like midnight at the latest. Even that is way too late for me. But, it does really come with a bit of like, you do have to almost have this like your confidence and your skin up, right? Like I know a lot of people aren't in like of my personality. Like, I don't mind being the odd one out. We do have to do a lot of work around like our people pleasing tendencies and setting healthy boundaries and even communicating with our friends. Like now, I can do those sorts of moves at family gatherings because our whole family knows that we go to bed early. It's not a thing. Like, it's not a big, like, where did you go? It's like, oh, they're in bed. Like, it's okay. Yeah. Right. So having these conversations and kind of, it does become sort of setting that precedent with the people around you, whether it's your family or friends, even with eating healthy, right? It's like, okay, like Danny's just going to be that one that brings her own food, right? Because she's not going to want to eat hot dogs with us, and that's okay, right? So it does, like, it almost takes some training with your friends and family just so they can know, like, hey, this is how I'm going to be showing up. I'm going to bed at 10 and I'm bringing my own food because I don't want to eat hot dogs or whatever. And over time, they'll stop, quote unquote, making fun of you, or hopefully you can communicate that and not let it bother you. I mean, that's some big inner work, but it's an important part to not let yourself get like guilted and shamed into staying up late when you know that it's not what you want to do.
Yes. Oh no. I mean, this is so interesting, because I've been on a bunch of podcasts, but I don't think that we've gotten as in depth on this area, which is so huge. And actually, I think I'm going to make a point to actually bring up more of this more often, because it's in the practice of this. I think there's also that finesse of how to then not feel, like a victim because everyone else is eating this particular way, and knowing that the truth is, the reason we say in this conversation around sleep being a skill is that the average person is so unaware of all of these things that will massively impact their sleep. And so in the realm of food, the types of food and the timing of that food is going to be a huge indicator of the type of sleep you're going to get or not get throughout the course of the night. And most people just don't know that. So
tell us more about that. What do you mean by that?
Okay, so a great resource if anyone wants to learn more and go in depth, because it can get really layered, is a book called The Circadian Code by Dr. Sachin Panda out of the Salk Institute, where they've got decades of research in really circadian rhythm and meal timing. But so kind of the really important takeaway there is that throughout the course of the day, so our glucose really acts on a circadian rhythm. So there's a rhythm to what that's going to look like from the morning, from when you first wake up to when you're going to sleep. And there's certain abilities for us to process different types of foods at different times. Great podcasts, with people like Levels or NutriSense, or some of these companies that are looking to outside of diabetics, which of course you can get lots of information with diabetics, but also for people that are non-diabetic and really believe to be eating healthy, and then put on a continuous glucose monitor and realize, oh my God, there's all kinds of stuff going on. So the timing of the types of food is also very important. So what that looks like in the realm of sleep, one common one is known as circadian rhythm intermittent fasting. And what that looks like is that you're eating within sunrise and sunset. And there's even apps, where you can, so like Zero app, you can choose circadian rhythm intermittent fasting. It will geotag you where you are on the globe, and then kind of gamify what time did you stop eating, and then were you outside of that window of sunrise and sunset. Now, of course, in the summer, that can be more doable for the average person, but in the winter, a lot of people can really struggle with that because it's bringing you much earlier in the day. And what would that look like? However, what we find is that when people do kind of experiment with this, and of course, bio-individual and do what works for you, but what we see is that often there are lots of improvements in the quality of your sleep, particularly if you mind the last meal, so that you're looking to even explore with 4 to 5 hours before you're going to sleep to be your last bite of food. So the reason for that is that that allows sufficient digestion throughout the course of the night before you go into sleep. And then that lymphatic drainage that we spoke about before being so important. If your body is having to deal with digestion and all the blood flow and energy process that takes on, and going to the gut versus really being able to tend to particularly the brain, but then all these other areas of repair that needs to happen while you're sleeping, it's giving you insufficient recovery the next day. And then what you often will see, and from a measurable stance, so I can almost always tell if someone ate late. And when I say late, sometimes that's depending on the person and what their schedule is, that can still be within like 3 hours before bed, 2 hours before bed. So really explore this. But so what that would look like for me when I'm looking at their stats is that their heart rate's up, elevated higher than normal from their baseline. Their HRV, their heart rate variability, has gone down. Their body temperature might be higher to deal with, because as you're digesting, the body temperature is up, which is counter to the cues that we want to give to the body to go to sleep, which we want to cue it to start lowering body temperature. So there's a number of things that you're likely to see. And then you're also likely to see more of those wake ups because of that instability. But so that is one type. And then the other type is called early time restricted feeding. And so instead of what people often are doing nowadays, where they're skipping breakfast, this is kind of the reverse. So you're waking up, and within around, an hour after waking, you're having your first meal, but then you're stopping your last meal. And that's more around like 2 p.m., 3 p.m. And now I'm not saying that people need to go run and try this, but I'm just saying that this is something that does have some really interesting studies behind it. And this is more akin to how I'm often eating, but of course, adjusting for different times in our cycle if you're of menstruating age. But it can be so massively impactful on your sleep results. Now, but this one, and that's really what they found to be some of the most beneficial, is you're basically skipping dinner in a lot of ways. So instead of skipping breakfast, you're skipping dinner. They found this one to be the most impactful for your circadian rhythm and overall health well-being. But the problem is kind of what we spoke to before, the social component, because then you're not being able to bond with people over dinner and what have you. So it does depend on the construct of how you're setting up your life. But that's another way that you could look at to manage your nutrition and sleep.
Wow, that's so fascinating. Thank you. I'd never heard of the circadian fasting. That's so neat. I've heard of that in spiritual context. Like I have friends who do that, in terms of like certain types of fasting every year, where you only eat between, sunrise and sunset. And
yes.
So it's really cool that they're doing studies on that and noticing that. And, you're talking about like the skipping dinner, and I'm like, yes, that's what I usually do. Like when I do intermittent fast, I'm not perfect at it by any means, but that is always my tendency. It's like, I do want to eat breakfast within a couple hours of waking up, and then I'd rather skip dinner. But that's exactly the challenge that I've had. Like if we go out, or, we're like, or my day is really busy and it's like 4 o'clock and I haven't eaten yet. And I'm like, okay, well, I need to eat now, right? I need to eat at normal dinner time. So it's, yeah, it can be like, I still haven't figured it out, everybody. I'm totally admitting that. Like, this is really, it is tricky with our varied lives these days. And how do we actually, manage and support that? But there's lots of options, which is pretty neat.
Yes. And I appreciate you saying like, oh, I haven't figured it out, because it's also, I want to be responsible too, is that, it's not only bio-individual in the construct of the timing that you choose to implement, but there's also times in your life, and certainly for women of menstruating age, many weeks of your life that will not necessarily make sense to bring that in. And you might want to have more of a gentle timeline of 13 hours where you're not eating. So it does depend on a lot of variables and stressors and other things. So certainly, be mindful of this. But I think it can be so impactful, because one of the big things that has come out of the research at the Salk Institute on this topic of circadian timing and food is that what's happening more by and large is that people are continuously eating and not really stopping. So, and barring sleeping, but even there's people that are sleeping in between. So they'll wake up, they can't sleep, they get something. Yep. I mean, it's really, there's, when you start logging what people are intaking, there seems to be this tendency. So that's why they talk in first bite, last bite kind of nomenclature. And so what that looks like is, instead of, because people might think, they say, oh, no, this doesn't apply to me. I have a normal time dinner and I've got time in between and then I go to sleep. No big deal. But then they might not be considering that any bite of food outside of that last meal basically turns on those clock genes. So the thing about this is that everything we're talking about is that there's a master clock in our brain known as our suprachiasmatic nucleus, and that really acts as the conductor for all these peripheral clocks that are in every cell of our body and every organ in our body. And it can very easily be kind of thrown off. And this was the Nobel Prize was given in 2017 for really understanding the impacts of circadian rhythms on our overall health and well-being, and how the symphony kind of gets created in our body. And then when something's out of tune, there's like a trombone or something that's off, then a lot of things can kind of fall to the wayside. And so that's what we see when these clocks get misaligned. And one of those indicators, they're known as zeitgeibers or time givers. And one of those time givers is the meal timing that we are partaking in. So if you put this into the framework of sort of ancestral health kind of guidance, then we would have for thousands and millions of years been living in alignment with nature. And from that place, we would have been only having a small opportunity to do some of these things. So meaning the sun would rise and you'd be, often sleeping on the ground, and that would be very cool. So the cooling environment, then the sun rises, and with the presence of the light, then also things warm up. So those two things, so those can be takeaways for anyone listening too, is that when you wake up, you want to get as much bright light as possible, natural bright light from the sun, getting it in your eyes. But then you also want the temperature to make a change too, to tell your body that now it's time to take on the rest of the day. So you can change your ambient temperature if possible. And then you're going throughout the rest of the day. And from that place, then there are other things presumably that you're doing that would only be happening in the past within sunrise and sunset. And so you'd be exercising, hunting, moving, you'd be eating, you'd be socializing. All of these sort of things would be happening. But then once the sun would set for a long time, that was sort of party over. One of the first biohacks is really fire, because then that allowed us to sort of extend our days just a bit, but still minimal and still not impacting our melatonin production because of the warm hue of the fire. So then from that place, you get squeezed out a little couple hours, but you're still going to bed. You're pretty tethered for the most part to sunrise and sunset. And that's kind of how things were for a long time. But now there's actually a great study that came out in 2001 from the EPA. And what that found, this is back in 2001, before a pandemic or lockdown or all these sort of things, but the average American, and it was an American-centric study, but was spending 93% of their time indoors. And it broke down to 87% of their life in a building, but then the other 6% was in automobiles. So the reason, like, why are we talking about that? We're talking about that because the more you go indoors, kind of like zoo animals, the less we are connected to those rhythms that would really do a lot of this work for us. And now that we're kind of divorced from this, then and spending on average 93% of our time inside, which probably is even higher now, that from that place, we are really doing some damage to these rhythms and these biorhythms that we can absolutely implement some, clear takeaway strategies. I know we spoke to meal timing, but also light timing, darkness timing, temperature timing, exercise timing, drug timing, known as chronopharmacology. So there's so many things that we can do to kind of start to realign these rhythms.
Wow. And obviously spend more time outside.
Yes, exactly.
Come on, people.
I mean, that really starts to solve a lot of these problems, honestly, is if we just push ourselves outside into nature. And again, not from a woo perspective, from a perspective that we are biologically hardwired, that those cues told us what time it was and what to be doing when, and that includes hormonal productions, many, many hormones that get impacted, among a lot of other things, your heart rate, your stressors, your blood pressure. I mean, so many things will change as you change some of these behaviors.
Yeah, that's so fascinating and such a great reminder. I mean, we all need that reminder, right? To get outside more. And it's hard. I will admit it's hard here in Canada in the winter, but for a lot of people listening, like in the cold months, right? Like right now it's absolutely pouring outside. I mean, I could go out, but I can stand by the window and hang out. And like, does that even do anything?
So really good point. I'm glad you said that. So there are studies that show that it takes anywhere from 50 to 100 times longer to reset that master clock, the supraplasmatic nucleus, when you're getting your sunlight from behind a window. It's better, 100% better, but it is still going to not be as powerful as getting outside. And so from that place, even on a cloudy day or what have you, in most instances, it's still going to be much brighter of a light. And actually, I was just reading a study today that just came out where it's one of the first studies where they're looking to create recommendations of illuminance or light, of what you should be getting, almost like quote unquote prescriptive ranges throughout the course of the day, which is really exciting.
Wow.
So meaning that you want to get, there's something called sunlight anchoring, and you want to get your brightest shot of light anchored on the first half of your day. And what that would look like is, so they're playing with different types of range recommendations, but you can play with this yourself on apps. So there's one called Light Meter that's for free, and there's other free light apps that you can just hold it on your phone, your smartphone, and then check the light output in your space, the lux. So most indoor environments are going to be, like 100, maybe 300 lux output inside. Whereas if you go outside at any given point throughout the course of the day, depending, it can max out to up to 100,000 lux or more on really bright days, particularly if you are in areas closer to the equator or what have you, but certainly can get into those thousands of lux. So you're going to get much more of that light exposure by getting outside. So it does remind us of this. And then the other thing is that when we are in northern latitude locations, that versus, which, I mean, I grew up in Maine, which is fairly north. And so a lot of our tendency would be like, well, it's gross out, and so there's no sun out there, so why bother? Maybe get a light box or what have you, which you can do. But instead, what we actually want to think about is augmenting our time outside during those periods, because there can be, because there's a benefit to the longer amount of exposure that we can have of that light can offset the kind of insufficient strength of that light at certain times of the year.
Right. So spending more time outside when it's cold and miserable.
Yes, exactly. There's a spiritual journey for you.
Yes. Okay. We're in the cold tank, right? Like,
yes. And,
soaking it in.
And there's something known as kind of geographical health. And there's a interesting book called Chasing the Sun that explores this change in our health based on different places that we do live. So also knowing that, so personally, what I ended up doing was moving from the Northeast into lower latitude locations to find kind of sunnier environments for health benefits. And I dealt with all kinds of health things, psoriasis, which is known to be benefited by the sun, and a number of other things. So for me, that made a lot of sense. But I'm not saying everyone needs to move and what have you, but just knowing that if you are in a location, there are some very real health implications that can be measurable. One that's really clear is with MS. So you can kind of Google MS rates based on where you live. Northern latitude locations above the 37th parallel And certainly Canada is a big element of this. Much higher rates of MS due to the, presumably, it seems to, the thinking is that from the a lesser amount of sun in that sunlight exposure in that environment, so less vitamin D, and seems that that's the thinking, could be the reason. So just knowing though that the sun plays a role with sleep, because what that looks like is not only setting of that master clock, but also vitamin D is a precursor to serotonin, which is a precursor to melatonin. So if you're not making sufficient melatonin, you want to kind of go back those steps and find out, are we deficient in one of those areas?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I know a lot of people probably listening. I know a lot of people in my life have like taking melatonin, right? It's this natural sleep supplement. I can't sleep, so I'm just going to take melatonin. And again, like, that can be helpful in times, but we can produce our own, right? We need to be careful where we're taking those Band-Aid approaches, right? And I love that you're guiding us back to where does that actually come from?
Yes.
Which is, so what other, I know you've mentioned a lot of these throughout, but I kind of would love to sum them up. And if there's anything else, how do we improve our sleep? What are some of the biggest things that you notice people can really benefit from, other than getting outside all day, right?
Yes.
And all these other things. But how can we create that environment for sleep and really start making those changes? What do you see are the most impactful?
Yeah, really great question. So one, you hit the nail on the head with the nature element. That's going to be a really important element there. When we can even call it things like rewilding, or just kind of exposing ourselves to some of that light and different kind of environment that is available, different improvements in air quality outside, grounding benefits, lots of things that can come from that. But aside from that, what you're really looking to do, say if we're largely living in an indoor kind of lifestyle, how can we mimic those changes that are outside while we're inside? And I can assure you too that from a technology perspective, a lot of this is going to get kind of handled down the road with a lot of plans for smart houses. If you choose to, be a part of the kind of Internet of Things technology conversation, where there'll be circadian centric lighting, circadian centric temperature, more interaction with biophilia. So sort of indoor, outdoor living in your space. So lots of things on the horizon to make this easier. But in the meantime, what you can do, the most impactful zeitgeber or time giver is light. And we spoke to that a bit. So really becoming a bit of a light connoisseur. If you get nothing else out of all the things we've talked about today, please let them be that sunlight anchoring piece. Get yourself outside in the mornings, but then also have a higher amplitude of light throughout the course of your day. If you are in certain areas where there might be things that are not, I have clients in Sweden and Alaska and what have you, and they've got total darkness for entire months of the year. So that can be an opportunity to look at different types of light boxes. But so you really want to focus on that light piece. Now, the flip side of light is darkness. So then post sunset, you want to set up your environment to have, to mimic as much of sunset as you possibly can. So having more red lights, candles, fire, Himalayan salt lamps, all these different types of very, very dim lighting. And actually in that study that I was just reading today, one of their suggestions was to have it be 10 lux or less into the evening. So if you measure with that app we talked about, making sure that your lux output is really, really low. So people might say, oh, come on, my lighting is not that bad. I've just got a 60-watt bulb here and this other thing. But do know that can really, truly, measurably impact the amount of quality melatonin that you're producing at the times that you want to produce it. So it's just sort of a free, basically, or very inexpensive change you can make. And then certainly while you're sleeping, having total darkness. There's even studies that show insulin, problematic insulin response when we have light exposed to the body and the surface of our skin throughout the course of our night. So you can even, there's arguments of how that could affect our waistline of the types of light that we have when. So light, dark, then there's temperature timing. And temperature timing looks like when you first wake up, mimicking what we talked about as the presence of the sun, it would get warm in our environment. So inside you want to change your temperature because it's not meant to be static all day. So you change the ambient temperature. So I always turn up our temperature in our space in the early morning hours. And you're looking to also mimic sort of a cortisol pulse. And so a nice healthy one, not too high, not too low. But then one of the next ones that is nestled underneath temperature, and it's all these different things that can affect the body temperature. So one we spoke about a bit, which is meal timing, and that can really drastically affect your body temperature. So getting clear on that. And of course, meal type is going to be important too, with all the great work that you do. So getting clear on those things. So for instance, good examples can be for women of menstruating age, if we're not getting clear on the type of quality foods that we're having at certain times of our cycle and pairing that accordingly, that can affect some of our sleep quality, particularly in the second half of our cycle and luteal phase. That might be a time when you might want to get some healthy carb choices, but within, certainly that's a longer conversation, but so being more aware that parts of our cycle might affect our quality of sleep, and that the food can play a role in that. But then also our movement timing is a big one too. So ensuring that we are almost like, with a kid, we tire out a kid and just, oh, they're going to sleep great tonight. We might say that about our pets or what have you. We are the same, and we absolutely need to create more of that sleep pressure for ourselves, because there's so much sort of sedentary living that's happening. Talking to you from a standing desk, so trying to find as much of the possibilities to have some of that movement, even just the difference between standing and sitting, and then getting lots of movement outside. And it's a great way to kind of stack all these things, get your light exposure, get your movement in, get the blood flowing. But then ideally not having that go too late into the night to disrupt your sleep. And then another interesting one is called thought timing. And so thought timing is really interesting in that you can measure the difference in types of thoughts, so hyperactive thoughts at different parts of the night. So seemingly what we've seen in certain studies is that people that deal with chronic insomnia have measurably warmer brain matter in the prefrontal cortex in certain studies. So that's where the thinking came to even have cooling head caps, was one of the original parts of some of these studies to rectify that, to help people kind of calm the brain and then be able to drift off to sleep. There's even gadgets out there, Ebb technology, not saying anyone needs to get this, but just it illustrates that the cooling part of the prefrontal cortex can help support falling asleep, so sleep onset. But it gives reverence to the fact that if you are sort of ruminating or going down that thought pattern of lots of types of thoughts that maybe aren't serving us at the wrong times, then we want to start to time the type of thoughts that we're having, and put them where they kind of belong, and start to see, are there particular tracks we might be going down at night? When we pull out the phone, we're like, I know I shouldn't really pull up the email or go on the whatever Instagram or whatever, and because that we see how activating this can be. We had a Olympic coach on the podcast, who's sleep coach on the podcast for the Olympics, and what he had helped with some of the participants there was to eliminate novelty in particularly around like the 90 minutes before bed, because we want to not activate too much of the brain at the wrong times, because it can, even if it's exciting things or fun topics, that can still get us really worked up, and we want to be doing the opposite in those certain hours and kind of winding down, and that goes into the thought timing realm. And then another one is called chronopharmacology that we pointed to, chrono meaning time, and so the timing of those drugs, and the most common ones being coffee, alcohol, THC, supplements even can go into that category. So then timing of, are those serving our sleep? And can we kind of rework the timeline of those, or do we need to abstain from some of those, or some of those just not working for us? So those are just a few of the things that we can do to improve our sleep.
Just a few, just a handful. Yes. Those are amazing, yes. Mollie. Thank you. Some really, really important tips there. And I love the piece that you mentioned about thinking, because that came up for me earlier, and I wanted to mention that. That's been such a big one for me. And I think a lot of my listeners, a lot of people out there really struggle with that, like those ruminating thoughts right before bed. Right. And we can start maybe taking an audit or observing those couple hours before bed. What are we thinking about? What are we doing? Right. Are we engaging in things that are stimulating? And I've had that very experience where, like you mentioned, pull out and check my email, or not shut off, right? Or watch a scary movie, even that, what are we watching? Are you watching the news right before bed? No wonder you're not sleeping, right? So really starting to pay attention. Am I actually supporting my brain and turning off here, or am I stimulating myself? And one of the best sleep hacks that I think I ever implemented for me was planning my day like at night, like after my work day is over, I always plan the next day and I write down all my to-dos. I write down all the things I need to do so that I can shut that part of my brain off and get into rest mode. And if I didn't do that, like before, when I didn't do that, I would lay in bed going, oh, what do I need to do tomorrow? I'm going to forget something. Oh my goodness, I should write that down. Like I need to get, like, I would just like worry about forgetting something the next day. So like having those pieces around the thoughts, I think, are so important for anybody who's relating to it being the thoughts keeping you up. Have that notepad by the side of your bed, or plan your day the night before.
Yes, 100%. And you're tapping into so many things that are, they really have some science behind them too. Cal Newport has the book Deep Work, where he speaks to the importance of kind of shut down complete, he calls it. So just having kind of a ritual where you close the laptop, or you say like, okay, I'm completing this part of my work. And certainly for any entrepreneurs listening, that's a lot of who I'm working with, is that kind of pull to, there's no way I can be off right now. Who do I think I am? I need to still do X, Y, and Z. What are you nuts? And so, but the gift of really setting ourselves up powerfully, and to your point, also planning the day, can help close the loop on all the things that we got to do, and trust that then we'll deal with those tomorrow, and kind of bracket the things that we just completed and review of that, and then get clear on, okay, there's time set up, and so everything's handled for tomorrow. Now I can be in the evening. And certainly this is work in progress. Like for all of us, we're always going to be exploring. We think we got it handled, and then something comes up. Then you get a new project, client thing, whatever, and then it can all, we have to restructure it again, or maybe you have to course correct. And that's where that original point about sleep serving as a barometer of the workability of your life comes in, because we want to also get that it's never just like fixed. It's going to be dynamic, and it will swing and shift, and it's okay if we start to kind of go off course a little bit. It's just the noticing, can we get more facile in, okay, all right, I've been getting a little lax with the tech at night, or whatever it is for us. So let's bring it back. And that can be an ongoing kind of mastery in that skill set.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because we're not perfect, and I'm definitely not. Like, I'm watching movies sometimes in bed, like with my red lights.
Nice. There you go. See, a little balance.
Yeah, the balance. And, I think that is really beautiful to understand that it is this ebb and flow, and catching ourselves and shifting, and also not beating ourselves up when things happen. I know I was sharing with you before, this last week hasn't been my best sleep week, and that's okay. I know what I need to do to get back on it, and I will. And, let's not use this as another thing for anyone listening, that's maybe struggling with sleep. Don't use this as another thing to stress about, right? I think that just makes it worse, right?
Please, yes. And so the takeaway is like excitement, hopefully, that, oh my gosh, there's so many things I can actually do to make a difference. I'm in the driver's seat. It's not just sort of like, either be mystified. Why am I laying here not sleeping? There's all these things that I can set into place if I want to experiment. But also there's an entire area of study looked at acceptance commitment therapy for insomnia. And that practice is really great from a perspective of accepting certain times that we might not have the best night of sleep, and not fighting it or resisting it or overthinking it or thinking it's always going to be like this. That's certainly what I was doing when I went through my period of insomnia, and I would make it worse, because then I would start spinning in this and then be so angry and frustrated and what have you. And when we can use this as an opportunity to kind of practice acceptance, and then from that place, all the things that can kind of work into that from a letting go perspective, which is paramount for sleep, we can really learn a lot about ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, Mollie, this has been incredible. I want to keep talking with you for hours. I have so many more questions.
Me too.
We'll have to get you back on the podcast. I want to be respectful of your time. And I think this is such a great place to start this conversation, and everybody listening, hopefully you've really got a lot of nuggets out of what Mollie shared. We'll definitely have you back. And for anyone who wants to come and get to, listen to your podcast and find more about what you're doing online, where can they find you?
Yes, absolutely. So sleepisaskill.com can act as the nice bucket for all kinds of things. You can take a sleep assessment where you can get immediately get responses back and resources and things you can do for your own sleep with what you're dealing with. You can sign up for our weekly sleep newsletter when we aim for that to be the most obsessive sleep newsletter on the planet, to get lots of interesting information or experiments in there. Weekly sleep podcast as well. And then if you are looking for beyond that and you're really wanting to dive in deeper, then we do have two different types of ways to working together. So we do have the group coaching, which actually, as we were talking about beforehand, is coming right up. Very exciting about some new things that we're bringing into that for May. So that's going to be in May 2022. So that's very exciting, and ongoingly have different iterations of an opportunity for people to be in a group setting with Buddha, that sleep technology. So wearing different sleep trackers and getting to kind of gamify, but together on that journey. And then we also have one-on-one packages if people want to have more kind of individualized support as well.
Amazing. Amazing. I'm so excited for the group experience. As you know, I'm a huge fan of like bringing people together in these challenges and in these transformations. It's just out of this world. So really exciting that you're hosting that in May. I'll make sure that all the links Mollie just mentioned, as well as if anyone wants to come and learn more about this group experience she's creating, I'll make sure those links are below this episode. And thank you again, Mollie, for being here. This has been absolutely incredible. Can't wait to have you back.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me. And we're definitely going to get you over on the podcast to share about sugar and sleep and how those are connected. So more to come.
Yes, let's do it. All right, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode. If you're loving what we talked about today, please remember to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone you love. And if you're ready to dive deeper into discovering your root causes and patterns that are keeping you hooked on sugar, be sure to check out our brand new free workshop series that will help you kick emotional eating for good. Find the link to download this free series and other amazing resources in the show notes below.